Welcome to the Northeast Divide podcast, and thank you again for listening or watching. If you're watching us on YouTube, I'm John. I'm joined by Anth, and once again, we're here to talk about the two biggest football clubs in the Northeast: Newcastle United and Sunderland. Now, Anth, we were going to start this week. We're going to talk a little bit about Sunderland's two away defeats at Huddersfield and Birmingham, but those two results have transpired in a pretty mad couple of days. Talk us through it.
Crazy, absolutely. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting the backlash, especially after the Huddersfield performance, which was beyond woeful. It was absolutely terrible. I wasn't expecting anything brilliant from a midweek match, especially Huddersfield away. I think I called it 1-0 to us, obviously 1-0 to them. So fully deserved as well. But I don't know what happened against Huddersfield, but it was just terrible, absolutely terrible. And then obviously Birmingham, the Mowbray sort of connection. I wish him a speedy recovery as well with whatever he's going to be going through for the next 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah, that was inevitable as well, to be fair. But again, it was just the lack of urgency. The performances were below par from just about everyone. I think a handful got maybe 7s, a lot of 4s, 5s when it comes to ratings out of 10 in the Sunderland Echo and other local papers. But yeah, and then obviously the Hume handshake, that wasn't a handshake, a side five, a high five. Do you know, John, I was talking to my workmate, the lovely Linda, and she's Sunderland daft and very knowledgeable. And she went, you know what, Anth? She went, I watched it from just about every angle that you could. And she went, he ignored him, man. He ignored him. And I thought, you can't be doing that. And then I've watched it very closely and I was thinking, how could he not have seen him? So I think that was that what I was thinking. That might be the death knell for his managerial career with us. But I was thinking who we're going to get in or what's going to happen if he does go. And I thought he would have been given a bit of extra time, but obviously he had to go. It's been decided. So yeah, good luck, and I'll not say good riddance because that's pretty.
I think a lot of Sunderland fans will say good riddance, though, won't they? This has been a talking point since we started this pod a couple of months ago. Every week we seem to be talking about Michael Beale as he's starting to turn the fans around, or how long is it before he goes? So there's an air of inevitability about this, and I was listening to Radio 5 Live, and they had, I can't remember what the guy's called from Radio Newcastle who does the Sunderland commentary. Nick Barnes, that's it, isn't it?
Yes, Nick Barnes.
So he was on and he was talking about it, and he basically just said, yeah, there's an air of inevitability about it. And he's right. And basically what he said is that he never had the fans on his side, and it was just a matter of time. And if you're having to win 8, 9, 10 games in a row to get to that point where you could play game 11 and lose, and then all of a sudden there's a rumbling, that's an issue. That is a huge issue. So I think that's my concern more than anything else for him, is that it was always going to get to this point at some stage. It was just kind of about when. Now there was another thread. So the Twitter page, I think it's the Second Tier podcast or something like that, or I'm not sure if it's somebody Second Tier podcast. So this is really interesting. So there was an account which has now been deleted, and it was called player_ID, and it had been posting a lot of pro Mick Beale tweets over the last few weeks. And it showed, one of the things was wide angle footage from Saturday showing that he was talking to Barr, trying to defend himself for not shaking the hand. And then it retweeted a post from a Coventry podcast saying, if Sunderland sack Beale, who would want that job and all of this. If you go a little bit further back, there was stuff around kind of him in Scotland and how that was going against Celtic. Now, a little bit further on, there's somebody's tweeted saying, give Michael Beale new business, player_ID a follow, and check out the website. You'll not regret it. So basically, this website on Twitter that's been like retweeting loads of pro Michael Beale stuff or tweeting it generally was his Twitter page, like on a different alias. So I think it backs up a lot of the things that we said about his insecurity and about the fact that he's very defensive and that he tries to, if he's not happy with the narrative, he needs to put it out. But to be caught out like that, yeah, it's pretty bad luck for him.
That is utterly bizarre. It really is. I've never heard anything like that before in my entire life. Now, I know the fella allegedly has a big ego and he doesn't like to take criticism. And what got me with regards to that, and we discussed it before and you'd mentioned it, was the Huddersfield game and how he basically blamed two of the substitutes, saying that they didn't have enough impact on the game. And I thought, well, hold on a minute. You announced the first 11. You decided upon it. You decided upon who was on the bench and the tactics. So, yeah, they mightn't have performed very well, but you can't make them the scapegoats for an absolutely lackluster, woeful performance against Huddersfield. It was just, yeah. So, I mean, I'm gobsmacked at that claim, but am I surprised? No, not really.
No, it backs up kind of the character point we've been making, I think. Okay, so obviously Dodds is getting it till the end of the season. The club have announced. Longer term, have you got any thoughts about who you think would take it, or who you'd want to take it, or any thought? I mean, they were talking about Will Still again on the radio, because obviously there was a bit of a compensation issue, and that's why he didn't come. And ultimately that was why they ended up with Beale. So, I mean, where do you think the club is on this, or what are they thinking?
Do you know, I haven't got a clue, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. There's lots of names being bandied around. Kane's cropping up again, which will be interesting to see if that gathers pace and, bears fruit. But do you go back to an old lover? Will it be the same again? Will it be as romantic as the first time around? Possibly not. So, yeah, there's that. But still is a name that keeps getting mentioned, and I've watched footage of him with regards to him switching from English to French and effing and jeffing in English, and just he seems very. He looks like he can motivate players, and he's an intelligent young man. I know he's gone about it sort of a slightly different way with regards to his coaching methods and what have you, and how he's ended up in French football. But you cannot deny the fact that he's doing ever so well in the record he's got at the moment. So, and there's been some funny names mentioned, like Eric Roy, a former Sunderland player, and there's quite a few names being mentioned, but I honestly haven't got a clue which way they're going to go, because that's the beauty of Sunderland Football Club. It's just sometimes you just kind of fathom out what's going to happen.
But if you were so my question is, if it was, so if you're Speakman and Kirill, whatever he's called, like who you pick, like, and I know, so well researched. Who would you want? Who would you want to bring in if you were the person making that decision?
I think I would like Still, and I think the difference between him and Beale would be he'd be given time by the supporters. If he's got the team he's managing at the moment going really well and playing good football, and I think a bit like with Mowbray, we were very patient with Mowbray, and yeah, there were times when it wasn't great, and yes, we looked a bit lackluster when he had a plan A rather than a plan B, but he had them playing attractive football 99.9% of the time, or trying to play attractive football on the front foot and effort, and that's all we've ever wanted. Whereas with Beale, just not the same. But I would like Still, and I think he'd be given time, and I think he'd play a good tactical game and have us on the front foot as Mowbray did. But he's young, he's hungry, and I think he's got a bit about him. So yeah, I think he'd be a good appointment.
Another name. So one of my mates who's a Sunderland fan I work with, he put out there for me was Cooper. So I mean, I think he did a really good job at Forest. I think he was probably a little bit unlucky. I think Forest were trying to got the Premier League somehow from the bottom of the Championship, and then Forest owner decides he wants to play fantasy football and signs about 96 players in 3 windows or whatever. Obviously I'm exaggerating there, but signs all these players, and I don't like the fans. The Forest fans, I think, they loved him and they didn't want to see him go. So when he did go, and they brought Nunes in, and you can understand them, and you can understand them bringing in someone to try and keep them in the Premier League, especially when it looks like they're probably going to get a point deduction because of that fantasy football we've just been talking about. My feeling on it was when he said that name to me, and I try my best not to disrespect Sunderland, but I feel like it would be a real coup if you did bring him in. That's my opinion on it. But you're a Sunderland fan. Put me right or agree with us. Like, what's your thoughts on that? Because for me, I feel like he's built his stock up higher. Yes, he took Forest when they're at the bottom of the Championship, but with all due respect, it's Nottingham Forest, and they are a big club historically. I think Sunderland, yes, they're just outside the playoffs, and he's unemployed at the minute. Palace would have been one that was interesting, but obviously that job's already taken. Thoughts?
It's a long shot. It would be a good appointment. It's a long shot, and I think he'll be given another crack at the Premiership if any roles do become available. Fleet of Fire. Yeah, it would be nice. I think he had a lot to do with at Forest, didn't he? Like you say, a lot of players coming in, absolute craziness, and he had them playing good football. So, and he had the supporters behind him. And again, he's well known for getting his teams to play attractive football. But I think it is a bit fanciful. I don't think we'll get him. But yeah, it would have been a nice appointment. But realistically, no.
Okay. Well, let's see. Let's wait and see. So we expect Dodds to have it until the end of the season, and then a new face to come in the summer. But let's see how that season goes. Now, another quiet week on Tyneside. So we ended up drawing at the weekend against Bournemouth in a game. When I was watching, I felt like we're probably lucky to get a point out of it. Really struggled for some reason. And then there's been lots of noise. So basically, we finished recording last week, Anth, and then within about the space of an hour or two, the noise around Dan Ashworth really ramped up. That it looked like he was going to be going to Man United. It's been a really, really odd week because he's still been at work, and he was at the match on Saturday, and then all of a sudden Monday he's placed on gardening leave by Newcastle, and they say, and it's clear what's happened. Obviously, Man United have made an approach. Ashworth's agreed to go, so we've placed him on gardening leave. What's your take on the madness on Tyneside?
There's a lot going on behind the scenes, isn't there? I know it's normally managerial positions that get talked about. If a manager loses the job, who's going to come in next, or other teams will attempt to unsettle other players to try and we've got an interest in that player now. Clubs come in for them, and the player will sort of not down tools, but they'll be affected by it. So it's very rare that this happens behind the scenes, but it's obviously he was a good appointment for years, wasn't he? Good appointment for years, proven track record. So yeah, does it affect the players on the pitch? Did that have anything to do with the performance at the weekend? You never know, do you? I know Brighton having the same issue at present, aren't they? Because I think Chelsea have maybe appointed them now. So I read earlier. I don't know. So yeah, I mean, do you think it's affected the Newcastle players? Do you think that sort of thing does?
I'm not sure, right? But what I am sure of is that it's fairly clear that this was going to happen. It's been fairly inevitable for the last week or so that he was going to get to a point where he's going to accept the fact that he's going to go to Man United. But there's been rumours about this since like November, December time that Man United, when Ineos came in, they like Dan Ashworth as a sporting director. That's the direction that they want to go in. It's a really odd one for me because I just feel like we've not handled it very well. I think that we should have basically last week, when the noise got to a certain level, at that point we should have pulled him into a room and said, look, we need you to make a commitment at this stage, and and you're not leaving this office until you make a commitment about what happens next, because there's clearly something going on, and if you don't want to be here anymore, that is fine, but we need to start the garden leave process. I don't understand why he was having meetings with scouts on Thursday and Friday, as reported, and then was at the match on Saturday. Like I just can't get my head around it, and I just think if that's any other kind of profession where there's commercial sensitivity involved in that way, I think there's no way that he gets to kind of work that week. And look, I was really pleased when we appointed him. I thought it was an excellent appointment, and I thought it was exactly what we needed. The one appointment I think has been so pivotal for us for years and years was you needed someone to fix a club from top to bottom, because it was a broken club. Because money doesn't fix everything, and Everton have shown that as one example. So there's no point just going in and spending everything that you can, because you've got to spend it sensibly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me that was the bit that where I looked at it and I went, it just hasn't been managed amazingly. It was a very short statement on Monday, but very clear. Like, look, he's starting his gardening leave, and we don't want him to. Obviously we're sad he's going, but the project will go on. But I'm not sure if it filtered down to the players to that extent. I think that's another level of things, but I don't think stuff like that helps generally. I think generally you want clarity. And Luke Edwards asked an excellent question in the press conference on Friday to Eddie Howe, and he actually said, has Dan Ashworth told you that he's going to stay at Newcastle United this week? And Eddie Howe couldn't say anything, but no. And at that point, it's even clearer and what's going to happen, and they just needed to resolve it as soon as possible. But 20 million is the quoted compensation that Newcastle are wanting for Ashworth. Otherwise, he can't start at Man United until the January transfer window of 2026.
20 million quid.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's crazy. Would Manchester United be willing to pay that?
Well, that's what's the interesting bit, mate, because you're already starting to see bits between the lines on social media, where it's almost that narrative of apologies, listeners, where you're seeing that narrative almost of kind of, oh no, Man United wouldn't be prepared to pay that, and if they need to wait, they will. But there's also been a report in the last 12 hours to say Man United are considering looking at other options because they don't want to wait that long. So I think there's a lot of posturing left, right, and centre, and ultimately we've placed him on gardening leave on full pay, whilst we wait for Man United essentially to decide what they're going to do. We need to protect our interests, and fair play to the club. One thing they have got right, if they haven't handled the initial bit right, he's protected in terms of either he's not going to start there for a year and a half, just almost 2 years, or there'll be a fair whack of money coming the club's way. But I think they'll come to a compromise of some description. So I imagine, it might be that he's involved next January's transfer window, and we get a decent wedge of cash for him at some point. But I think we paid 4 or 5 million to Brighton to break his gardening leave, so it's not massively abnormal. And we got to remember, this is somebody who the club identified really early on that they wanted to bring in, and then they had to wait some gardening leave, and then they paid to separate him. I think we waited about 8 months for him. So from that point of view, they were obviously going to protect their investment, and that bit contractually they've done pretty well, in my opinion.
Do you know, as well, with regards to Manchester United, I think what they would like would be stability and sustainability with regards to what's gone on in the background noise. I mean, you hear Gary Neville talk about it, and they're not being run properly off the pitch, allegedly. There's a lot going on. The stadium's allegedly fallen to bits. There's a lot going on. They've overpaid transfer fees for certain players who are underperforming or just not performing. So £20 million to get someone in who may find solutions with regards to that. Could be a drop in the just a minute figure, couldn't it? Really, considering, yeah. So I don't. That paints a very different picture, then, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to that argument, doesn't it, about kind of where the value is, I suppose. And is it worth it? Is it worth spending £20 million if that person's able to almost rebuild and fix your club? And Man United are in massive need of that. I also think I can totally understand the pull of Man United. I'm not too kind of big to say, oh well, why would he leave Newcastle? I think the Newcastle project's an amazing project and an incredible opportunity for anybody at any level. But I think if you're being offered the keys to Old Trafford with potentially more power, because that's the other thing that's being kind of intimated, is that, or kind of PIF, there's too much time kind of need to be signed off from them. So does Ashworth maybe feel he doesn't have enough kind of power there? I'm speculating here, but Matt Targett was signed permanently, didn't really feature at left back. Was that an Ashworth kind of decision to bring him in? Lewis Hall, brought in on loan with the possibility of a permanent transfer later, has barely featured this season. Was that a Dan Ashworth signing? Sandro Tonali was definitely one that Ashworth did. Did we do the correct due diligence? Could we have done more due diligence on that? I'm being a little bit, don't get me wrong, lots of kind of accusations going out there, and it's easy for me to do that when he's decided to leave. But they're things that people may ask and may look at. For me, I think he probably is the best in his field at what he does. That's why Man United and Ineos have gone after him. But I can totally understand if he's getting a bigger pay packet, and he's being offered the keys to Old Trafford essentially to turn them round. I can totally understand why that's appealing for him. And I think you have to be honest about that. This is one of the biggest clubs in the world. Newcastle aspire to be that and can get there one day with the owners they've got. I've got no doubt about that. But Man United literally just need somebody who know what they're doing to make good football decisions, and that's where actually, what's he called, Ratcliffe has gone in and clearly understands what he needs to do to turn the sport and operation around, point the right people, and start making more sensible decisions. And Ashworth's a key part of that. Hence why, unless they pay us a shitload, he's going nowhere apart from trimming his flowers in his back garden. So we'll see how that develops over time. Anth, I set you a little task. I said, go away. There's this little documentary on Netflix that I'd like you to go and watch and pick out some key moments from season for me and how you found it.
Oh, do you know what? People might think I'm biased and what have you. I mean, the first two series were heart-wrenching for very different reasons, but just the human take on it with regards to, on and off the pitch. I mean, there was so much in just the first episode. I mean, I wrote some little pointers down. There was so much. I mean, obviously the new owners came in, the Lee Johnson sacking after the 6-0 defeat at Bolton. There was all sorts. Mental health struggles. It was the human touch with regards to some of the male supporters. Obviously, being from the northeast of England, it still is very working class. It was predominantly working class. You were expected to act in a certain way if you were a male of the species, I suppose, depending on where you grew up. Shipbuilding, so it was interesting to hear some of the supporters take on how Sunderland can, make the day, break the day, but ultimately it helps with their mental health that they've got a team to follow, and through thick and thin, and they've made new friends, and there was an interesting take on that. And also with regards to the players, you had Luke O'Nien, who went out with a bad injury, and he was out for a good few months, and he said he struggled with his mental health. Jack Clark, when he first came in, obviously Johnson brought him in, and then obviously Johnson was gone, so he thought, is this going to be another one of those clubs I go to where the loan system doesn't work for me? Am I just going to be plodding along? So is it interesting to hear his take? And people forget that footballers are human beings as well. Yes, they're on great money. A lot of them, yes, they might have the life of Riley. Oh, they've got natural talent. I'd be taking advantage of that. I'd play for peanuts. It's like anything, isn't it? You have your good days and your bad days. So there was that. There was so much, honestly, with regards to Alex Neil when he came in. How he had to go about changing the mentality. The results weren't great to start off with, but just everything about it. I mean, I know Newcastle supporters are like, oh, I saw you cry on Netflix and all that. And yeah, it's all very funny. It's good crack and what have you. I had enough of that. I was on the receiving end of that loads. But yeah, I mean, it's just a fascinating watch if you're impartial and you come into. I know you've got your Man City ones, which I think you said you watched the Spurs one. You've got all of those. It's on a slightly smaller scale, and it's not so much the success on the pitch because there hasn't been much of it. Although it did focus on that in the last episode, but it also focused on the sad passing of one of our supporters who'd followed Sunderland through thick and thin. So I mean, I cried at the end of it. I'll be honest with you. I was, it was a roller coaster ride of emotions, but it was a brilliant watch, and it was so well made as well by Fullwell 73. It was so well made, who are obviously Sunderland supporters as well. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it, but it was a roller coaster ride of emotions. It was.
Yeah, and I've sat and watched it. Not as enjoyable for me as the first two seasons, I must admit.
Obviously,
but I do. I think it was. I think you're right. I think you've touched on a lot of things that that it touched on, and the fact that really like the club has changed quite a lot. And I think if you look at that club from the first season, where you've got Chris Coleman, having a go at someone who's having a go at him because he's got a wife and 4 kids, like that makes any difference. And you move to this stage where actually you've won the playoff final to go back up to the championship. And you got young players like Jack Clark who, and I think what was really nice to see is the big memories from me from those first 2 seasons of Sunderland Till I Die were just about how the club was in a bit of a mess, how the players didn't really kind of, I think, respect the club. Some of them, the way that they went on, whether that's Rodwell, whether that was oh God, what was he called? The
Gibson.
Gibson, that's it. Yeah. So whether it was them,
Dong as well. Wow, there's so many to name. There's so many.
But the fact that from there you've got Jack Clark going to that veteran centre and helping to volunteer, and he doesn't look like he's there because he's been told, the media guys have told him he has to be there. He looks like he's very much part of it, enjoying it, getting properly engaged. And Sunderland's always been a really good, strong community club and has supported their local community, and they're well renowned for that. So it was good to see that represented, I think, more than anything else. And I think, it was a lovely tribute to the fan who obviously is featured on previous seasons of it. I think the only thing for me that I didn't understand is why they've only released it now, because just to kind of, it was around about this, basically, it was the same period of time that the Newcastle documentary was being filmed, and Newcastle's was released at the start of the season. So I found it, and I know it's Netflix instead of Amazon, but I did find that odd that it was so much later, because I was thinking, oh God, yeah, it felt like a lifetime ago, some of the events as you saw them unfold. So I forgot Jermaine Defoe had gone back to play for us another time, and
I did as well. Yeah, and I saw that. I went, oh yeah, he did come back, didn't he?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's mad. It's mad how quickly football changes, but
crazy.
But no, I think they did a good job, and I think it's probably a nice way to tie it off. I'm not expecting season 4, season 5, but you can't write this off, because look, I think although it'd be very good for this podcast if it happened, promotion's not out of the question. I've got to say that. I think it's tough, but I think that would be the next one, wouldn't it? It would be Sunderland Till I Die season 4 would probably be either getting into the Premier League or actually being in the Premier League. So let's wait and see what happens with that. Okay, so we've talked about Mick Beale, we've talked about Dan Ashworth, we've talked about Sunderland Till I Die. Let's talk some more football. So Newcastle have got an away game in London at 8 o'clock at night on Saturday. So another great one for the fans. We're up against Arsenal. If you were a Newcastle fan going into this game, how optimistic would you be feeling?
Do you know what? I know anything can happen in football. Saturday evening kickoff as well. I mean, it's ridiculous. I know you've spoken about it before. We both have. If I was a Newcastle United supporter, I'd class it as just a good day stroke night out down the big smoke. And if anything else came of it, brilliant. But class it as a good day stroke night out at the capital, because I mean, Arsenal have hit top gear of late. I mean, they're 5-0. How many 5-0 away wins is it? Just he's got them ticking over nicely again, hasn't he? And he's got them all playing, and just I don't know. I wouldn't like to. I wouldn't like to say that Arsenal run riot, because I think Newcastle are due a good result. I know the away record's brilliant, but I think they're due a good result against one of the top 3, top 4. So who knows? And it's stranger things have happened. It's that weird part of the season, isn't it, where I suppose anything can happen. But the way that Arsenal are playing at the moment, they're just a juggernaut. Just the way they're playing free flowing attacking football. It's fantastic to watch.
Yeah. So we've, as you say, we've won 4 on the bounce, which started on the 6th of January at the Stadium of Light.
Every week without fail.
Just in case anyone had forgotten that was the case, and that's when it started. Yeah, so obviously with so 2 of the results come in the FA Cups, 2 of them are coming in the league. After Arsenal, of course, we play Blackburn in the FA Cup next week, which I've been saying for a while. So this time next week, we'll have a good idea as to the chances of Newcastle getting through to that quarter-final. Won't quite be full time, but we'll be pretty close to it. And for me, again, I'll go back to, I know which fixture I'd be prioritising here. Looking at the league, I think we've got a chance of getting into Europe through the league, but you know what it is, nothing would make the season more than us getting to that cup final. And certainly, like, if we could lift the cup, and if we won the FA Cup, that qualifies you for Europe anyway. So no doubt for me, I'd be resting players on Saturday to have the strongest lineup you could possibly have. But we're back to it's like whack-a-mole, like 2 players return from injury and then 2 go out, and it's just it feels like endless for us. And hopefully we've got either Alexander Isak or Wilson or both back by the time the FA Cup comes round. I'm less worried about Saturday, which I very much see. And I hate to use this term, it is a bit of a free hit for us. I think you're right. Arsenal are on great form. Declan Rice was the best player on the pitch up at St James's Park earlier this year. He absolutely dominated that game for them. And although there was no clear-cut reason to disallow that goal, it really was the tightest of margins. I didn't actually celebrate when the ball went in because I thought the ball was out. And bear in mind, I sit up near the gods normally, so I was miles away. But I turned around, like my nephews were celebrating. Like, I was just like, "Nah, that's out." And then there was 3 different ways that they tried to rule a goal out, and it wasn't clear and obvious. So, hand it to VAR. They've made a very sensible decision on that. But that was really the narrowest of margins to win a game, and we are going to have to be playing at the level of at least of what we did against Villa if we want to have that opportunity and get that result that we need. You guys got Swansea at home on Saturday with Michael Beale departed. Do you think you're going to get a caretaker bounce off the back of that? Because, I mean, it's fair to say Beale hasn't been popular.
No. I like Dodds, though. I like him. He's got a good relationship with the player. He's been around for a while. People forget this. I think it's is it now the 3rd time he stepped in, not the 2nd, and he did okay last time. But I'll be honest with you, I really cannot predict what's going to happen. I mean, Swansea get a good footballing side, possibly underachieving. I don't know. I really don't know. I think it'll be a good turnout, as it always is, and I think he'll get the backing of the supporters. And do you know what? I don't. If we make the playoffs, it'll be fantastic. If we don't, with Dodds at the helm, if we didn't make the playoffs, I don't think they would, hold him personally responsible. Whereas, obviously, if Beale had still been in charge, it would have been a case of, well, he'd be hung, drawn, and quartered, wouldn't he? So, yeah, I think we'll get a little bit of a bounce, but I don't know. I think we might draw on Saturday. I think we might draw. I don't think we've got the greatest of records against Swansea at home over in recent years. I know that when we played them in the Premiership, when Gus Poyet was in charge and we got beat 3-1, we were safe, praise be. I mean, they taught us a football and lesson. It was 3. I was at that match, and they taught us a football and lesson. To be fair,
Was
it's
it
not what we play for, but
was it Rodgers who was manager then, or Martinez, or
was it not? Who was it?
Was not Poyet? Was are you saying Poyet was not? Was
Well,
he not Sunderland manager?
Yeah, sorry, when he was Sunderland manager,
Yeah.
Poyet. Sorry,
Yeah,
when we
yeah,
played
yeah.
them at the stadium, all right, yeah, and it was nothing to play for. It was end of season game, last match of the season, and they beat us 3-1, and it was a case of right, okay, but Swansea 2-2 will be my prediction,
Okay.
possibly.
I mean, what I would say again, and I know I said this last week, and I'm not trying to jinx you, I promise. But Swansea are 18th in the league. They've
Yeah.
lost 4 of their last 5. They're on 36. You're on 47. I know you've lost your last 2, but before that you'd won 1, draw 1, won 1. So Swansea are a side you should be beating at Stadium of Light, and even under this car crash of a manager you've just had, you had 2 very comfortable home wins against sides that you should beat at home, which is not something that you've done enough, to be fair, in the Championship since you've been back. So it's got to be an opportunity, I think, for you really to try and turn a corner, I would have thought. And then, after that, I think you then play Norwich after that, was I say before?
Yes, they're hitting form.
Yeah, and Norwich are a really odd side, aren't they? Because they obviously wasn't too long ago they were in the Premier League, and they came down and then they got bounced straight back up, but then they've stopped down, and now you've got the likes of Leicester and Southampton and Leeds who all just seem to be miles ahead of most of the rest of the Ipswich are like clinging on by the skin of their teeth to try and be in that conversation still, but I think they're probably going to fall away. And it goes back to that argument about, are we going to end up with almost this middle division of teams that are too good for the Premier League, too good for the Championship, but not good enough for the Premier League, and they're literally going to yo-yo because the amount of money through parachutes just kind of almost keeps that in check. So it's always going to be hard to break that, isn't it? And get back into that. And yeah, Norwich are an odd one, but no, I think I would fancy you to beat Swansea at the same. I like personally. I think that's something. I think in terms of Newcastle's games, I will put some predictions on them. So I think we get beat probably 2-0 on Saturday night. And then against Blackburn, I'm going to say that we're going to win 1-0 and go through to the FA Cup quarter-final. So that's what I'm hoping for. I talk to you all as I close off this podcast to say thanks for listening. What I will say is I'm not sure what we're doing next week because Anth is going to be away because he's turning 21. So he's going to be going away to celebrate that.
Wow.
In the meantime, I'm trying to work out what we do, whether we do an early record or a late record, or whether we have another week off. So that's something we'll look at. So if we don't have an episode next week, I'm certainly going to have one the week after. But really appreciate you all listening to us. Thank you for watching. If you've been watching, thanks for listening. This has been the Northeast Divide podcast. Thank you and goodbye.